She worked 3 jobs to support him through med school. Then he left her the day he got his license. There is a specific kind of betrayal that does not announce itself with shouting or slammed doors or dramatic confrontations in the room. It arrives quietly. It arrives on a kitchen counter next to a cold cup of coffee and a single house key. It arrives in a manila envelope with your name written on the front in the handwriting of the man you have been loving for 8 years. The same handwriting you stayed up past midnight helping to perfect on medical school applications. The same handwriting on thank you letters to professors that he would have forgotten to send if you had not reminded him. The same handwriting on birthday cards he gave you every year that said things like, "I could not do any of this without you." He meant it when he wrote those cards. That is the part that will take Brianna years to unknot. He meant it every single time. And then the moment he no longer needed it to be true, he folded it up neatly, put it in a drawer somewhere inside himself, and walked out the door. She had just come off a 12-hour overnight shift. Her feet were swollen inside her shoes. Her back ached in that deep, specific way that only comes from hours of sitting in the wrong chair doing work that nobody sees. She had not eaten a real meal since the granola bar she stuffed into her scrubs pocket at 2 in the morning because there was no time for anything else. She was tired in the way that goes beyond the body, the kind of tired that settles into your bones and your spirit and makes the short walk from the parking lot to the front door feel like something you have to talk yourself through one step at a time. And when she finally pushed open the door of the apartment she had been paying for mostly by herself for the last 3 years, the first thing she saw was the envelope. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Something in her body knew before her mind was ready to know. The apartment was too quiet. The air was different. She could not have explained it to anyone, but she felt it instantly. That specific absence, like a room where a clock has stopped, and you do not realize how much you had been counting on that sound until it is gone. She walked to the counter. She picked up the envelope. She opened it. Inside were divorce papers. And the date stamped at the top of the first page was the same date that Derek Callahan had received his medical license. The same morning she had ironed his shirt, made his eggs, tied his tie, kissed him at the door, and told him she was proud of him. The same morning he became Dr. Derek Callahan. He was already gone. Every piece of clothing, every textbook, every photograph with his face in it. Gone. He had come back while she was at work, paying for the apartment they shared, and he had taken everything that belonged to him and left nothing behind except her name on an envelope and a key that was no longer needed and a cup of coffee that had gone completely cold. 8 years. 8 years of her life sitting on that counter getting cold. Before we get into this story, I want to know where you are watching from right now. Drop a comment below and tell me if you are watching from the United States, Canada, or the United Kingdom. We read every single comment, and we would love to hear from you. And if you have not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button right now because what you are about to hear is one of the most heartbreaking and ultimately powerful stories we have ever told on this channel. It is a story about what it costs to love someone with everything you have. It is a story about sacrifice and silence and the slow, devastating discovery that the person you built your life around was building a different life the entire time. And it is a story about what happens when a woman who has been carrying someone else's dream finally puts it down and picks up her own. Now let us get into this. Brianna Osei was 22 years old in the fall of 2012 when she walked into a campus job fair in Columbus, Ohio, and met the man who would take the next 8 years of her life and hand them back to her in an envelope. She was not looking for love. She was practical in the specific way that people become practical when they grow up in a household where there was never quite enough of anything, and everyone was always just a little too tired and a little too stretched to slow down and dream out loud. She had just finished her degree in health administration, and she needed a job. Something stable. Something real. She made a list of companies she wanted to talk to, and she went down that list methodically the way she did everything, carefully and thoroughly, and without wasting time. Derek Callahan was not even on her list. He was not a recruiter. He was a volunteer helping with setup, carrying folding tables, and adjusting the placement of signs. And somehow by early afternoon, he had found his way to her side of the room and introduced himself with a kind of easy confidence that did not feel like arrogance because it was not trying to impress anyone. It was just him. Just the natural comfort of a person who is genuinely at ease inside his own skin. He was 24. Pre-med. He had dark hair and a jaw you noticed, and these bright eyes that were doing something unusual when he looked at her. They were paying attention. Not the performance of attention that people give you when they want something from you, but actual attention, the real kind. The kind that makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room, because to this person, in this moment, you genuinely are. By the end of the afternoon, he had her number on a napkin. They dated for 8 months, and in those 8 months Brianna Osei fell in love in the particular total way that only happens once. Not because Derek was perfect, but because he made her feel, for the first time in her life, like someone was actually listening. Like her thoughts were worth finishing. Like she mattered in the room, even when she was quiet. He told her about his grandfather, a Caribbean man who had worked with his hands his entire life and never complained, and dreamed his whole life of having a doctor in the family. Derek carried that dream like something sacred. He was going to be that doctor. He was going to be the one who made it mean something. And the way he talked about it, the way his whole face changed when he talked about it, made Brianna feel like she was not just hearing a dream, but being invited into one. That invitation was the most expensive thing she ever accepted. In 2013, Derek was accepted to medical school in Nashville, and Brianna packed up her Columbus apartment and moved with him without being asked. Her mother sat across from her at the kitchen table and said nothing, but her eyes said everything. Her best friend Portia put both hands flat on the table and said, "Bri, you do not have a ring, you do not have a plan, you have a feeling, and feelings do not pay rent." Brianna laughed. She said some people just know. She knew. She was just wrong about what she knew. Nashville was hard from the very first week, but Brianna did not say that to anyone. Not to Portia. Not to her mother. Not even to herself in the quiet moments before sleep. Because saying it would have made it real, and making it real would have meant admitting that the life she had uprooted herself for was not going to be as easy as love had made it look. Derek was in classes from early morning until late evening. He was stressed and exhausted in a way that made him sometimes look right through her, like she was a piece of furniture in the room rather than the woman who had given up her city and her community and her familiar life to stand beside him in this one. She told herself it was the pressure. She told herself he was fighting for their future, and that this was what fighting for a future looked like from the inside, and that she needed to be strong enough for both of them right now. So she worked. She found a medical billing coordinator position at a clinic in East Nashville within 2 weeks. It paid decently, but not enough. Not for the apartment, not for Derek's course fees, not for the textbooks that cost $300 each. So she added a second job. Weekend shifts at the front desk of a hotel in downtown Nashville, standing in shoes that hurt on floors that were hard, smiling at strangers for 8 hours while her body begged her to sit down. And then in 2015, when Derek's second-year tuition increased, and the gap between what financial aid covered and what was actually owed grew too wide to paper over, Brianna started driving rideshare 3 nights a week after her clinic shifts ended. 3 jobs. She was working 3 jobs so that Derek Callahan could become a doctor. She kept a small notebook where she tracked every dollar. She called it the future fund in her head, never out loud, because saying it out loud would have made her feel the weight of it, and she could not afford to feel the weight of it. She had a number she was working toward, a number that meant the other side of all of this. She wrote it at the top of every new page like a prayer. But I need you to understand something, because this story is so much more than money. She was the one who cooked on the rare evenings Derek made it home before 9. She was the one who sat across from him at the kitchen table until midnight with flashcards, quizzing him on pharmacology and pathology in a quiet, patient voice, even when she had been on her feet for 12 hours. She was the one who called his mother every week when Derek forgot, which was often, because she understood that his mother needed to hear his voice, and someone had to remember that. She was the one who took a personal day she could not afford when Derek had a minor knee procedure, who sat in a waiting room for 4 hours alone, who drove him home, who iced his knee, who fought him for 3 days about going back to studying too soon in one. She was every small invisible thing that kept his life running while he was busy building it. They got married in 2016. Small ceremony. Brianna's cousin did the flowers. No honeymoon because there was no money for a honeymoon. So they spent a weekend at a state park in Tennessee with sandwiches and a hand-lettered sign against a tree that said "Just Married," and Brianna took a photo of it and sent it to Portia, who cried. She found her dress at a consignment shop, off-white with clean, simple lines that fit her body like the universe owed her at least that one thing. She was breathtaking in it. Every single person there said so. Her mother flew in and held her hand before the ceremony, and did not say a word about the warnings she had given. And Derek, when she walked down that aisle toward him, Derek Callahan stood at the end of it and cried. Not a single dignified tear. His whole face broke open. He pressed his lips together, and his eyes filled, and he wiped them with the back of his hand and laughed at himself, and then looked at her like she was the only solid thing in the world. She held on to that image for years after everything fell apart. She held on to it because it was real. Whatever he became, whatever he had already been underneath the surface, in that moment he had meant it. And that is the cruelest kind of betrayal. Not the kind that was always false. The kind that was once completely true and then stopped being true while you were not looking. In 2017, Derek graduated from medical school, and Brianna celebrated him the way she had celebrated every milestone before it. She cooked his favorite meal, the jerk chicken recipe she had called his aunt 3 times to get exactly right, because it was his grandfather's recipe, and this night deserved that. She had worked a 9-hour shift before she came home and started cooking. She lit candles. She bought wine she could not really afford. She set the table like the occasion it was. Derek said it was the best night of his life. She believed him completely. And then residency began, and the man who had cried at their wedding started to disappear one small degree at a time. It was not the exhaustion. She knew his exhaustion. She had sat across from it at midnight with flashcards and cooked for it, and driven it home from procedures, and held it carefully for years. This was something else. This was a new quality of distance. A way of being in the same room with her while being entirely elsewhere. One-word answers where there used to be conversations. His eyes on his phone at moments when they used to be on her. Coming home and going straight to the shower before saying hello, before setting down his bag, before any of the small, ordinary rituals of return that couples build over years of sharing a life. She noticed. She cataloged. She told herself she was imagining things because the alternative was something she was not ready to look at directly. In 2018, her body started to break down. Vitamin deficiency, chronic back pain that woke her at 3 in the morning. A doctor who sat her down and told her that her test results were consistent with someone who had been running on empty for a sustained period. She was 30 years old and her body was handing her a bill for years of overwork, and she paid it by cutting back her hours at the hotel and stopping the rideshare driving. She stopped those jobs, but she never stopped working. She never stopped carrying the household. She never stopped putting Derek first, because that was the shape their life had taken, and she did not yet know how to question the shape without feeling like she was failing at everything. In 2019, she saw the name on his phone. She was not snooping. She needs you to know that. Derek had set his phone on the kitchen counter and walked away to answer the door, and the screen lit up with a message notification, and the name at the top was Cassidy. She did not read the message. She stepped back from the counter, and she breathed, and she told herself it was a colleague. Residency programs are full of people working in impossibly close quarters under impossible pressure, and connections form naturally, and she was not the kind of woman who burned her life down over a name on a screen. But she started paying attention. And what she saw over the weeks and months that followed made her stomach turn in a slow, cold way that she tried to stop feeling and could not stop feeling no matter how many times she told herself she was wrong. He came home later. He showered the moment he walked in before saying hello before doing anything else. He started bringing her coffee in the mornings and asking about her day with an attentiveness that felt like guilt wearing the costume of love. She knew the difference. She had felt real love from this man, and she knew what it felt like. And this was not it. This was management. This was a man keeping a situation calm while he figured out his exit. She sat him down at the kitchen table one evening. The same table where she had quizzed him for years, where she had eaten dinner alone more nights than she could count, where she had written numbers in her little notebook by lamplight while he slept. She sat him down and she looked at him directly, and she asked him plainly and quietly if there was someone else. Derek looked her in the eye without flinching and said no. He said she was imagining things. He said he was exhausted and he needed her support right now, not her suspicion. He said the fact that she was asking him this question revealed that she did not trust him, and that hurt him deeply after everything they had been through together. She apologized. Brianna Osei, who had worked 3 jobs and skipped vacations and eaten cheap and driven strangers around the city at midnight, and kept a notebook full of careful numbers, and given her entire 20s to this man's future, sat at that kitchen table and apologized to him. And she never asked again. In the spring of 2021, Derek completed his residency. The licensing exam was coming in August, and Brianna did what she had always done. She cleared space for him. She made sure the apartment was quiet on his study days. She cooked his meals and handled the laundry and the bills, and every phone call, and every logistical detail of their shared life without being asked, because that was who she had learned to be inside this marriage. The one who handled everything so that he could focus on the only thing that mattered. The week before his exam, she took 3 days off work. She told her supervisor it was a personal matter. She did not tell her supervisor that she was using those 3 days to be invisible, to make herself so small and so efficient that the man she loved would not have to spend a single unit of mental energy on anything except the exam that was going to change their lives. She did not know yet that it was only going to change his. He passed the exam on a Thursday in September 2021. She found out through a text message. 2 words. I passed. No exclamation point. No phone call. No come home and let me hold you because we did it. We actually did it. 8 years and we finally did it. Just 2 words sent from a man who was already emotionally living somewhere she had never been invited. She sent back celebration emojis. She called Portia. She started planning the dinner. She came home from her shift the next morning to the envelope on the counter. The cold coffee. The key. The apartment quietly emptied of every trace of him while she was at work paying for it. She stood in that kitchen and she read the divorce papers and she saw the date and she understood everything at once. Every late night. Every shower he took before saying hello. Every cup of coffee he brought her that felt like guilt. Every single time she had told herself she was imagining things. She had not been imagining anything. She sat down on the kitchen floor. Right there on the kitchen floor of the apartment that still smelled like him. And she sat in a silence so complete it had a sound of its own. She called Portia. Portia got in the car immediately. For hours from Columbus without stopping. She arrived at 11 at night with food and tissues and a rage on Brianna's behalf that was so pure and so protective it was the only warm thing in the entire apartment. She did not say I told you so. She sat down next to Brianna on the couch and took her hand and did not let go. Brianna did not cry right away. There is a kind of pain so total that the body does not know what shape to give it, and so it gives it no shape at all. It becomes a stillness, a silence. She sat in that silence for hours, staring at the wall, not moving, not speaking, just existing inside the wreckage of 8 years. Around 2 in the morning she started to cry, and when she started she could not stop. She cried for the 3 jobs. She cried for the notebooks and the flashcards and the knee procedure and the consignment shop dress. She cried for every Sunday shift at the hotel when she could have been sleeping. She cried for the man who had cried at their wedding. She cried for every version of the future she had written at the top of every new page in that little notebook. She cried until she was completely empty of everything except the bare truth of what had happened and what she was going to have to do next. On the 4th morning, Portia brought her coffee and sat down across from her and asked what she needed. Brianna wrapped both hands around the mug. She looked up. She said, I need a lawyer. Her name was Sandra Merritt. Small, soft-spoken, and precise in the way that makes opposing counsel nervous before she has said a single word. She sat across from Brianna in her office, and she listened without interrupting while Brianna laid out 8 years of a life and a marriage. When Brianna finished, Sandra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, tell me about the finances. And Brianna told her everything. The 3 jobs. The rent she had covered largely alone since 2013. The textbooks and the course fees and the MCAT preparation materials. The future fund. The actual physical notebook with every dollar recorded in careful columns in blue pen. Every dollar she had saved and every dollar she had spent in direct service of the career of a man who had filed divorce papers the morning he no longer needed her. She slid the notebook across the desk. Sandra turned the pages slowly and carefully, the way you handle something that matters. She looked at the dates and the columns and the 8 years of quiet, faithful documentation. And then she looked up at Brianna and said, he is going to wish he had left you with more than a cold cup of coffee. What followed was 14 months of legal proceedings that were not easy or clean or quick. Derek's attorneys were skilled and well paid, and they argued everything they could argue. That the marriage was brief by legal standards. That Brianna had been employed the entire time and had not sacrificed a quantifiable career opportunity. That whatever she had contributed had been given freely within the context of marriage. Sandra had the notebook. She had the subpoenaed bank records. She had a forensic accountant who spent 3 months calculating the precise value of Brianna's financial contribution to Derek's education against the projected lifetime earnings of a licensed physician in his specialty. And then in the middle of the proceedings, the truth about Cassidy Harmon came out. A fellow resident. A relationship that had been going on for at least 18 months before Derek filed those papers. Multiple colleagues confirmed it in depositions, quietly and carefully, but enough. The affair was documented. And in Tennessee, documented infidelity carries weight in a courtroom. Derek's team made a settlement offer. Sandra presented it to Brianna over coffee. Brianna listened to the full number. She thought about the notebook and the 3 jobs and the $37 tie she had bought on her lunch break because she wanted him to look like what she had spent 8 years making him into. She said no. Not with anger. Not with tears or speeches. Just no. Clean and final and completely certain. She was done being the quiet, accommodating one. She was done making herself smaller so that someone else could feel bigger. She was done. The judgment came down in the fall of 2022. A portion of Derek's projected medical income over 7 years. The remainder of the joint savings account he had attempted to quietly drain before filing, which Sandra had caught and frozen. A lump sum representing calculable marital equity. The judge's written decision used the phrase extraordinary and well-documented economic contribution, and Brianna read those words several times in the days that followed, not with triumph exactly, but with a deep and quiet recognition. She walked out of that courthouse on a Thursday afternoon in October with Portia on one side and Sandra on the other, and she stopped on the steps, and she stood in the light, and she closed her eyes and she breathed. Just breathed. She had not felt air that clean and longer than she could remember. She moved back to Columbus in early 2023. She rented an apartment by herself for the first time in her adult life, and she painted the walls the deep, warm terracotta color she had always loved and that Derek had once told her was too bold. She bought plants for every windowsill. She adopted a small rescue dog she named Pepper, who was chaotic and ridiculous, and chewed through 2 pairs of shoes in the first month and ran in frantic circles when she came home every single evening like her arrival was the best thing that had ever happened to him. She loved that dog with a specific fierceness that she understood was about more than just the dog. She enrolled at Ohio State in a graduate program in health policy. At 33 years old, she went back for the career she had quietly folded up and put away when she packed her Columbus apartment in 2013 to follow a man to Nashville. Not medical billing. Not processing other people's paperwork. Actually shaping healthcare systems. Actually building something. Her own thing. Her own dream. With her own name on it. She found a friend in her program named Loretta who had her own complicated history and a humor so dry and so perfectly timed that Brianna laughed until she ached. They studied together and ate cold takeout Thai food and talked past midnight about everything and eventually about the hard things too. About what it costs to love someone so completely that you stop being able to locate yourself inside the life you are supposedly sharing with them. Portia came to Columbus for her birthday in March, and they went out and Brianna danced until her feet gave out and kept dancing anyway. It sounds small. It was not small. It was a woman who had spent nearly a decade making herself as small and quiet and accommodating as possible, finally taking up space. Finally being loud. Finally dancing when she wanted to dance and not thinking about whether anyone needed anything from her first. She started writing. A journal at first, just for herself, the same careful way she had kept the notebook. But the journal became essays. Long pieces about invisible labor and the economics of love and what it really costs when a woman decides to be someone's foundation. About sacrifice and resentment and the complicated, liberating truth that she had not been entirely without choice in what happened to her, that she had made decisions, and that understanding her own decisions was the only thing that would ever fully set her free from them. She sent one essay to a small online publication in the summer of 2023 on an impulse she almost talked herself out of. They published it within the week. They asked for another. A larger publication found it and ran it with a headline she had not written, but recognized the moment she read it as completely true. I paid for his dream. Then I woke up. The response was a flood. Women wrote to her from everywhere. Women who had worked double shifts and skipped their own education and filed their own needs under later and watched the men they had built stand up straight and walk out the door. Women who had not had a notebook. Women who had not had a Sandra Merritt. Women who had taken whatever they were offered because no one had ever told them they were allowed to want more. They wrote to her, and they said, "This is my story too." They wrote to her, and they said, "I thought I was the only one." They wrote to her, and they said, "Thank you for saying the thing I did not have words for." She wrote back to as many as she could. As for Derek Callahan, he is a licensed physician in Nashville, Tennessee. He and Cassidy Harmon separated approximately 14 months after the divorce was finalized. The reasons were not made public. He is not remarried. The spousal support payments come on the first of every month. Automatic. Sandra made sure of that. Brianna does not think about Derek every day anymore. Some days she goes the entire day without him crossing her mind even once, and when she notices that she has gone the whole day, she feels something she has spent time learning to name accurately. It is not triumph. It is not simple relief. It is the quiet, specific satisfaction of a woman who found out exactly what she was made of when someone decided she was worth nothing, and she looked at that decision and she disagreed. She was not nothing. She was never nothing. She was the foundation. She was the fuel. She was every overnight shift, and every flashcard, and every carefully cooked dinner, and every hour in that hotel lobby, and every night behind the wheel of that car in the rain. She was the notebook and every patient, careful column of numbers written in blue pen by a woman who believed with her whole heart that if you kept track of things carefully enough, if you were thorough and faithful and present, the life you were working toward would eventually arrive. She was right about that. She was just wrong about whose life it was going to be. It was going to be hers. It is hers. Terracotta walls and a dog named Pepper and a graduate program 2 semesters from finished and an inbox full of messages from women who found her words in the middle of their own hard nights and felt, for the first time, like someone understood. A birthday in March where she danced until her body said stop, and she kept dancing anyway. She earned every single bit of it. Every single bit. Drop a comment right now and tell us. Have you ever poured so much of yourself into loving someone that you lost track of who you were without them? How did you find your way back? Tell us your story. We read every single comment without exception. And if this story moved something in you, please hit that like button and subscribe, because next week we are telling the story of a woman who discovered 22 years into her marriage that her husband had been living an entirely different life in a different city with a different family who had no idea she even existed. You will not want to miss that. I will see you there.